Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Raw Radiant Health, and I'm Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me. So today I want to talk about getting started on a raw food diet, and I want to talk specifically about kitchen equipment because I think a lot of times people get a little bit intimidated by the raw food diet because they see a lot of recipes that call for all sorts of appliances, like, high-speed turbo blender to a dehydrator to one of these things that makes these spiral spaghetti things and like all sorts of stuff, and people are just like, whoa, I don't have these things in my kitchen, and this is just too complicated, and they go running. And that even happened to me. Like I've mentioned this before, that I'd heard about the raw food diet years ago, and I was interested in it, and I even went and looked at like many books, but I was always just thrown off by like the long list of ingredients and the fact that they'd always ask for like dehydrator or blender or whatever, and things that I didn't have at the time, and I wasn't really, I was young and I didn't want to invest in it. And I have to say, like, before even getting into raw foods, like, I'd never even seen a dehydrator before, or barely knew what it did, or if anyone even owned one. I thought it was just something really way out there. And so when I got started, I want to use myself as an example because I think I'm a good example of someone that started with nothing and was able to be successful on 100% raw food diet. When I first started out on raw foods, and I started 100%, it was about a year and a half ago, the only appliance I had was like a generic household blender. I did have a juicer because I've been juicing for years. That I did have, but that was something I always had. But for my raw food kitchen equipment, my blender was not one of these turbo, like, crazy horsepower, beautiful blenders. It was just a basic blender, and I'm still using that blender. I've not yet upgraded. Eventually, one day, I'd love to get one of those turbo blenders, and I will, but at this point in time, I'm still content with what I've got, and it works, and it does its job, so it's great. So pretty much I had that blender, but I didn't have like a dehydrator. I didn't have one of those spiralizers to make pasta out of vegetables. Like I had nothing. I just had my little blender. And you know what? At that time, I just moved back to Canada, that I didn't even have a proper chef's knife. I was using, for quite a while, I was using just like a tomato knife that I was traveling with. And I had another steak knife that I was like, those were the two knives I was using to cut things, like literally these tiny little knives. So I didn't even have like a decent knife to use. So, but I do suggest for anyone that's getting started with the raw food diet and they're a little bit taken aback by all the equipment out there to do different things is don't get swayed by it at all. I would suggest the first thing to invest in is a decent knife and a cutting board. Like, if you have that, then you can do things. And then I'd say the first piece of equipment would be a blender, but you don't need to be putting out like crazy money for a blender. You can get like, just a typical household blender, and you can blend up your smoothies, your savory soups, your green smoothies, all that kind of stuff, your nut milks, everything. Like, it might have to be in the blender a little bit longer, but it'll do its job. Or you just, what the trick is that you just might have to add a little bit more water. And then these things actually get blended up pretty well. That's what I found is the best thing to do with a blender that's not as high powered. So I started off with not much equipment, and I didn't buy a dehydrator like for, I think it took me a good 8 months to even buy a dehydrator. So, and I was like living in Canada when, when I was raw. It was not like I was in like some like sunny tropical place. And I didn't, I was like, if I can go 8 months with no dehydrator in the beginning, I never had dehydrated food, I was perfectly fine. I was perfectly fine having my salads, having my dips, having my savory soups, my smoothies, all that. Like none of, things that were just simple to make and easy and fresh that, eventually it was great to invest in a dehydrator, and I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy that I can make other people food and things like that, and it's great, but it didn't determine my success. My success being on the diet was eating a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables and nuts and seeds and things like that. So I don't want anyone to get like freaked out and be like, oh, I can't do this because I don't have the equipment, or it'd be so much easier if I'd have, this equipment so I can make these type of foods and transition better. I don't think that, I don't think you need these things in order to make your transition easier. I just think you got to find foods that you enjoy eating and make them a lot and have them a lot and have them in your home in abundance, because that's what's going to keep you going. And, like I found, like, if I needed something that's heavier, I'd always make like a dip or something like that in the blender, with seeds or maybe a little bit of nuts, things like that, instead of, since I didn't have a dehydrator, make crackers or anything like that, there's always a way of finding that balance. And so that's what I just want to talk about simply today is about the equipment and about not letting that kind of stuff like hold you back from trying this out and being successful on it, because you can be successful on a raw food diet with virtually nothing. I mean, I've even traveled on a raw food diet for months on end with no blender, nothing, just a little, a tiny knife this big, and that was my equipment for months, and if I can do it, anyone can do it. So I'm going to leave you with that enjoy what you're making and keep it simple and keep it fun, and just know that everything you're doing is right. All right, so have a fabulous, fabulous day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.